During dinner, my father asked me, "Is your allowance enough?" I replied, "I never received one." That night, my mother remained silent. He had no idea. My name is Ethan. I'm 19 years old, and I just started studying medicine in New York City. I'm originally from Texas. My parents live in Dallas, where my dad works as a surgeon at a university hospital and my mom takes care of the home. After finishing high school, I moved to New York 4 months ago to live on my own. I worked hard to get into medical school in July, inspired by my father, but I haven't been able to enjoy university life like everyone else. I wanted to make friends, join clubs, have fun, but money has been very tight. My parents cover tuition, but all other expenses are on me. Besides attending classes, I've taken jobs as a tutor, event assistant, and bartender. Even so, I struggle to make ends meet with rent and basic expenses. I change jobs frequently to adjust to my schedule and normally work weekends. It's been exhausting, both mentally and physically. I arrive tired to classes, and when I return home late, I find it hard to find energy to study. I'm worried because I might have to repeat the year since I'm falling behind in my subjects. If this continues, I won't be able to focus on my studies, which should be my priority. I felt anxious and desperate, so I called my mother to ask for financial help, even if it was just a little. My father is almost never home due to his busy schedule, so my mother handles the finances. Although my dad earns well, my mom told me they didn't have extra money and that paying my tuition was already difficult, so they couldn't send me more. With that response, I felt trapped. When I returned to my apartment that night, I lay staring at the ceiling for hours. The apartment was small, just a studio with a private bathroom in Queens. It wasn't what I had imagined when dreaming about my university life in New York, but it was what I could afford. The walls were covered with damp stains, and some nights I had to place containers to collect the leaks. The refrigerator made a strange noise that sometimes woke me up. Many of my classmates lived in modern university residences or shared apartments in better areas. They had invited me several times to start-of-year parties, but I always had to decline because they coincided with my work shifts. Sometimes I made up excuses to avoid admitting the truth, that I didn't have money to buy even a few beers to share. The reality of my situation contrasted brutally with my expectations. While growing up in Dallas, my father always talked about how important medical education was. He told me stories about his university years and how it had been the best time of his life. How he had met my mother at a fraternity party, how he had formed friendships that continued to this day. How much you learn from both your professors and classmates. University shapes you as a person, Ethan, he would say. It's where you find yourself, where you define who you're going to be. But now I wondered how I could find myself when I barely had time to sleep. My daily routine was exhausting. I would get up at 5:30 in the morning to study for 2 hours before going to my first anatomy class at 8. After 4 hours of intensive classes, I would rush to tutor high school students for 2 more hours. Then I would return to the university for afternoon classes that ended at 6 p.m. 3 days a week, after classes, I worked as an assistant in the biology lab until 9 p.m., organizing materials and cleaning equipment. Thursdays and Fridays, and all weekends, I worked as a bartender at a bar near Times Square, returning home around 3 a.m. There were days when I didn't even have time to eat. My lunch consisted of energy bars that I kept in my backpack, and my dinner was whatever I could find on sale at the 24-hour supermarket near my house. Sometimes, when tips were good, I allowed myself to buy a hamburger at the fast food place on my way home. Money had never been a problem in my home. We weren't millionaires, but we lived comfortably in a residential neighborhood in Dallas. My father worked many hours but received good compensation for it. I never lacked anything material. I had my own car since I was 16. I went to summer camps. We traveled to tourist destinations during vacations. But now, for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to count every penny. The first time I saw the price of university textbooks, I almost fainted. I had to buy used editions from 10 years ago because the new ones were impossible to afford. I shared notes with classmates who could afford the updated materials. My mother had always been in charge of family finances. It was she who paid the bills, who made sure everything was in order. My father barely knew how much everyday things cost. I realized that he possibly had no idea what it really cost to live alone in New York. Many of my friends who live alone receive help from their parents, and I envy them. But I decided to keep working. When midterm exams came, I hadn't studied enough, and as expected, I had to take makeup exams. The makeup exams were a disaster. I barely slept the week before, trying to memorize everything I hadn't been able to learn during the semester. I drank so many cups of coffee that my hands were shaking. The day of the biochemistry exam, I almost fell asleep on the paper. My mind was foggy, and the questions seemed to be written in another language. I left the classroom knowing I had failed. I sat on a campus bench, and, for the first time since I had arrived in New York, I cried. They weren't tears of sadness, but of frustration. I had worked so hard to get here. I had dreamed of being a doctor since I was a child, and now everything was crumbling before my eyes. That day, I missed my shift at the lab. I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was fine. Instead, I walked through Central Park, observing families walking, couples laughing, students resting under trees with their books. I wondered if I would ever have that tranquility, that normalcy that seemed so distant to me. My phone rang while I was watching the pond. It was my lab boss. "Ethan, where are you? I've been waiting for you for an hour." "I'm sorry, I don't feel well," I replied, not entirely lying. "Look, I know you're going through a rough time with exams, but I need you to be responsible. If you can't commit to this job, I'll have to find someone else." I understand, it won't happen again, but I knew it was an empty promise. Something had to change. I couldn't continue like this. I finished exams in early August, and then summer break began. I planned to work as much as possible during this break to save all I can. Summer in New York was suffocating. The heat bounced between buildings, creating a cement oven. My apartment didn't have air conditioning, just an old fan that moved hot air from one side to the other. I slept with a damp towel over my body to combat the heat, but the heat was the least of my problems. I had gotten an extra job at a cafe that opened at 6 a.m. So now my routine included 4 hours there, followed by tutoring during the afternoon and the bar at night. Some days I worked 16 hours straight. The cafe owner, a Greek man named Nikos, looked at me with concern. "Young man, you work too much. It's not healthy." "I need the money, Nikos," I replied while quickly cleaning tables. "Your parents can't help you? They already do a lot paying for my university." Nikos wouldn't insist, but sometimes he would save me pastries that hadn't sold during the day or prepare sandwiches for me to take. Those small gestures of kindness kept me afloat. One day, while serving coffee to a regular customer, an economics professor from Columbia University, I overheard a conversation that made me reflect. "The system is designed to break students," the professor was saying to his companion. "We make them believe that higher education is the only way forward, but we burden them with impossible debts to pay or force them to work to exhaustion. What kind of society does this to its youth?" I kept thinking about those words all day. Was I part of that system? Was I sacrificing my health, my well-being, my youth for a degree that I might not even get if I continued like this? After the vacation, I want to focus more on my studies, so I'll reduce my work shifts. That means I must save more, so I'll also reduce my daily expenses. I began making calculations and keeping a detailed record of each expense. I discovered that a large part of my money was going to public transportation. I decided to buy a secondhand bicycle for $50. It was rusty, and the chain came off every few kilometers, but it allowed me to move around the city without spending on subway or bus. I also reorganized my food budget. I stopped buying coffee on the street, although Nikos insisted on giving it to me for free when I passed by the cafe, and I started preparing large pots of rice and beans that would last me several days. I bought a good quality thermos to carry water instead of buying bottles. To eat, I'll save with instant noodles, bread, and discounted pre-packaged meals. And when I have to move around the city, I'll use my bicycle to avoid transportation expenses. But the sacrifices went beyond the material. The hardest part was seeing how my social life was vanishing. The few friends I had made in class stopped inviting me out after so many rejections. I saw their stories on Instagram. Parties on rooftops with views of the Manhattan skyline, dinners at trendy restaurants, weekend excursions to the beaches of Long Island. Meanwhile, I spent my free days washing my clothes by hand to save on laundry or looking for deals at local supermarkets. I felt increasingly isolated. The loneliness in such a populated city was paradoxical and painful. I walked among crowds feeling invisible. I served drinks to people who laughed and celebrated while I could barely keep my eyes open. One night, while returning home after a particularly exhausting shift, I stopped on the Queensboro Bridge. The Manhattan skyline shone in front of me, a postcard of opportunities and promises. I wondered how many people were in my situation, struggling silently, pretending everything was fine while falling apart inside. I grew up in a well-off family, so I never worried about money. I never imagined living in this kind of poverty. My mother called me every Sunday afternoon. Our conversations had become superficial and short. I didn't tell her about my financial problems after that failed attempt. I didn't want to worry her. Or maybe I didn't want to confirm that they really couldn't help me. "How are classes going, son?" she would ask enthusiastically. "Good, Mom. Learning a lot." I lied. "And have you made friends? Your father always says that university friendships are for life." "Yes, a few of us are a very close group." Another lie. "I'm so glad, Ethan. I knew you would adapt well. You've always been very independent." That word, independent, hurt me especially. What I was experiencing wasn't independence, but abandonment disguised as autonomy. After those calls, I felt worse. The distance between the image I projected and my reality was growing larger. After moving, everything was very hectic, but I stayed in touch via messages with a friend from the university. Seeing his photos having fun made me sad to notice how different life could be for other students at the same university. My only close friend was Alex, a classmate who had noticed my constant exhaustion. He, unlike others, hadn't given up on me. He kept inviting me out, even though he knew I would probably say no. Alex came from a middle-class family from New Jersey. His parents had bought him a modest car and sent him a monthly allowance that, while not exorbitant, allowed him to live without worries. He shared an apartment with 2 other students in Brooklyn, which considerably reduced his housing expenses. One Friday afternoon, while we were in the anatomy lab, Alex asked me for the umpteenth time, "Do you want to come to a party tonight? It's at a friend's house in Williamsburg. Nothing fancy, just beer and pizza." I was about to give my usual answer when I realized that, for the first time in weeks, I didn't have to work that night. The head bartender at the bar had asked to do extra hours, so they had given me the night off. "Well, I think today I can," I replied, surprised at my own words. Alex's face lit up. "Finally, I was starting to think you were an alien or something." The party was in a small but cozy apartment. There were about 20 people, mostly medical students, and some from other faculties. At first, I felt uncomfortable, out of place. It had been so long since I had socialized that I had forgotten how to behave in such situations. But after one beer, the only one I would allow myself that night considering my budget, I began to relax. I talked with a girl named Sophia who studied neurology and shared my fascination with the human brain. I laughed at anecdotes about eccentric professors. For a few hours, I felt normal, part of something. When the party ended, Alex offered to take me home. "Can I take the subway?" I said, mentally calculating the cost of the trip. "No way, it's late and not safe. Besides, I have my dad's car this weekend." During the drive, Alex played 80s music, and we sang together to songs by Journey and Queen. It was the happiest moment I had had since arriving in New York. "You should go out more, Ethan," he told me as we entered Queens. "We all miss you at gatherings." "I work a lot," I admitted. "I don't have much free time." "I know, but you've got to live too, right? University isn't just about studying and working. For some of us, it is." I replied more acidly than I intended. Alex was silent for a moment and then asked sincerely, "Are you okay, Ethan?" Really, I thought about lying, about saying everything was perfect, as I did with my mother, but I was tired of pretending. "No, Alex, I'm not okay. I can barely pay the rent. I work in 3 different places. My grades are plummeting, and I feel like I'm failing at everything." My voice broke at the end of the sentence. Alex stopped the car on a quiet street. "Why didn't you tell me anything? We could have helped you." "How?" "It's not like you could give me money. There are many ways. Shared materials, group meals. You could have even moved in with us when we left last month." I hadn't considered those options. I had been so focused on my individual struggle that I hadn't contemplated collective solutions. "Besides," continued Alex, "there are scholarships and aid for students in your situation. Have you researched?" I hadn't done that. The truth is, I barely had time to breathe, much less to research financial aid options. "I'll help you look for information," offered Alex. "And meanwhile, come to dinner at our place when you can. Shannon always cooks too much." Shannon was one of his roommates, a culinary student who used her friends as guinea pigs for her culinary experiments. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. My friends invited me often, but but I had to decline because I had neither the time nor the money. "I'll drive. Let's go somewhere free," a classmate wrote to me. "I'll pass. I work every day and I'm going home soon for the holidays." I replied, "Are you sure you're okay? You always seem tired in class." "I think you're working too much," he said with concern. "I have physical energy and need to cover my expenses. See you when the news cycle starts," I answered. The conversation with Alex left me thinking. Maybe there were more alternatives than I had considered. The next day, I stopped by the university's financial aid office. There were forms for supplementary scholarships, better paid work-study programs than my current jobs, and even low-interest loans for students in emergency situations. As I filled out forms, I remembered my mother's words, "We don't have extra money." It was possible they were really in financial trouble. My father earned well as a surgeon, but maybe there were expenses I wasn't aware of. Or maybe it was just my mother's way of teaching me independence. That weekend, while working at the bar, I found myself looking at customers' faces more carefully. Many were young professionals, probably in their first jobs after university. Some looked exhausted, with dark circles and slumped shoulders, drinking to forget the week. Others were celebrating some success, laughing loudly and ordering rounds for everyone. I wondered what their lives were like, if they had gone through the same as me, if any of them had fainted from exhaustion while studying, if they had counted coins for the subway, if they had felt that knot in their stomach when checking their bank balance before paying rent. The following Tuesday, I received a notification from the university. I had obtained a partial scholarship for students with financial difficulties. It wasn't much, just $500 a month. But for me, it was a fortune. It meant I could leave one of my jobs, probably the cafe one, and have a few more hours to study and rest. That night, I called my mother to tell her the news. "That's great, son. I knew you would find a way," she said, as if it had always been part of the plan for me to struggle like this. "Mom, can you really not help me with something more?" I asked directly. "I'm not asking for much, just enough to not have to work in 3 different places." There was a long silence before she answered. "Ethan, your father doesn't know you're going through this. He thinks we send you a monthly allowance." Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water. "What? But you told me they didn't have extra money." "It's complicated." "Explain it to me then, because I'm on the verge of collapse here." My mother sighed deeply. "Your father and I are going through a difficult time. He doesn't know it, but we have some debts. I made some investments that didn't work out." "Investments? What kind of investments?" "Stocks, mainly. A friend recommended some companies that seemed promising, but we lost a lot of money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these months, I had been suffering because of poorly made financial decisions that I didn't even know existed. "How much did you lose?" "Almost all our savings, and I had to take out loans to cover some losses." "And Dad hasn't noticed?" "He never handles the finances, Ethan. He trusts me for that. I don't want to worry him with these problems. He already has enough stress at the hospital." I felt a mixture of anger and confusion. My mother had been hiding serious financial problems, not just from me, but from my father as well. And meanwhile, I was sacrificing my health and my education. "Mom, this can't continue. We need to talk to Dad. Please don't do it. I'm working on solving it. I've sold some jewelry. I'm saving on other expenses. It's not fair to any of us. This is not the way to handle family problems." The call ended without resolution. I was left staring at the phone, feeling that I knew less and less about my own family. After that, I went to my shift at the bar where I work, but shortly after, something unexpected happened. I fainted during service. It was a very busy Friday, full of customers, and while I was carrying some drinks, I felt dizzy. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The doctor told me I had fainted from exhaustion and malnutrition. They administered 4 bags of 4 fluids and discharged me that same day. The doctor who attended me was a young resident, probably only a few years older than me. He looked at me with a mixture of professional concern and personal empathy. "Medical student, right?" he asked while checking my vital signs. "How did you know?" I recognized the signs. Permanent dark circles, multiple jobs, ramen-based diet. I was there not too long ago. He gave me some nutritional recommendations and prescribed vitamins. But before discharging me, he sat next to my bed. "Look, I know it's not my place to tell you this, but medicine is a long career. If you burn out in the first year, you won't make it to the end, and we need you. We need doctors who understand what it is to struggle, who have real empathy, not just learned from books." His words deeply moved me. It was the first time someone acknowledged my struggle and validated it as something that might eventually make me better at my profession. I immediately called my boss at the bar to apologize. He told me that when he saw I wasn't responding, he called an ambulance without delay and also contacted my parents. "You've been taking too many shifts. I trusted you too much. I'm sorry. I want you to rest for the rest of the month," he told me. That meant less income for me. A few hours after returning from the hospital, I received a call from my father. His voice sounded agitated, worried. "Ethan, your bar boss just called me. Are you okay? Why didn't you let me know you were in the hospital?" "Dad, I didn't want to worry you. Exhaustion and malnutrition? What's going on, son?" It was the moment of truth. I couldn't keep hiding my situation, especially after what my mother had revealed. "Dad, I'm working too much. 3 jobs besides university. I don't have time to eat properly or to sleep enough." 3 jobs? Why do you need 3 jobs? "Because with just one, I can't pay rent and expenses." There was confused silence on the other end of the line. "But your mother and I send you a monthly allowance. It should be enough to cover your basic expenses." My heart skipped a beat. So my mother had not only lied to me, but to him as well. "Dad, I have never received any allowance." The silence that followed was even longer and heavier. "I'm going to call your mother," he finally said, "and then I'll call you back." I hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. The truth was finally coming to light, but I didn't know what consequences it would have for my family. While I was on the subway back home, I wondered if I should get more students for private lessons. I felt lost. I was supposed to work at the bar the next day, but now I had the day off. I decided to stay in bed and rest. The exhaustion hit me like a wave when I reached my apartment. My body, finally released from the adrenaline that had kept it functioning for months, completely surrendered. I slept for almost 14 hours straight, waking only to go to the bathroom and drink water. When I finally got up, it was already night. I had several missed calls from Alex and a message from my father. "I'm flying to New York tomorrow. We need to talk in person." I didn't know what to think. Would he be angry with me for revealing my mother's secret, or would he be worried about my health? The thought of seeing him made me nervous, but it also gave me a strange sense of relief. I wouldn't be alone in this anymore. Checking my phone, I saw a message from my friend that had arrived while I was unconscious. I responded and explained what had happened. Upon learning everything, he decided to come visit me. He brought groceries and cooked spaghetti for me. Alex arrived with several bags from the supermarket. He brought not only ingredients for spaghetti, but also fruits, vegetables, milk, eggs, bread, and other basic foods that I hadn't seen in my refrigerator for a long time. "You didn't have to do this," I said, embarrassed and grateful at the same time. Of course I did. That's what friends are for. While Alex was cooking, I told him about my conversation with my father and what I had discovered about the family finances. "Sounds like your mother might have a gambling problem," commented Alex, who had studied psychology before switching to medicine. "The investments might be disguised bets." I hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. It would explain my mother's urgency to keep the secret, her insistence that she was solving the problem. "If that's the case, it's a disease, Ethan," continued Alex as he stirred the sauce. "It's not just a matter of bad decisions, but a disorder that requires treatment." This perspective made me reconsider my anger toward my mother. If she really suffered from a gambling addiction, she needed professional help, not reproaches. The problem was that my father didn't know either, and now he was traveling to New York, probably confused and angry. "When does your dad arrive?" asked Alex, serving the spaghetti on chipped plates he had found in my kitchen. "Tomorrow afternoon. He told me he took a direct flight from Dallas. Do you want me to be with you when he comes?" I considered his offer. Alex was a good friend, and his presence could be comforting. But this was a family matter that we needed to resolve among ourselves. "I appreciate it, but I think it's better if I talk to him alone." Alex nodded, understanding. "Okay, but call me if you need anything at all." While we ate what he had prepared with such kindness, we talked about the cost of living alone. When I told him I wasn't receiving any financial support from my parents, he was surprised. "So that's why you work so much. But your dad is a doctor, right? Shouldn't you be getting some help?" I asked Mom, and she said that with tuition, they're already at their limit. "Seriously? But you're an only child, right? Maybe if you insist again, they can send you something." Mom said not even a small help is possible. "That can't be right. That doesn't make sense. I hate to say it, But maybe your dad is sick, or maybe he's unemployed, suggested Alex. Maybe he lost his job and they didn't want to tell you. I doubt it. I talked to him 3 days ago, and he mentioned a surgery he had performed that day. Then what other explanation could there be? Are they buying a new house, a yacht? Does your dad have another family? I almost laughed at the absurdity of that last suggestion, but I stopped myself. The truth is, I didn't know what was going on. It had been months since I had seen my parents in person, and phone calls were brief and superficial. My father worked so much that he was barely home when I called. And my mother, well, now I knew she had been lying to me. I don't know, Alex, but I'll find out tomorrow. After Alex left, I found myself thinking about all the possibilities. The exhaustion and recent health crisis had intensified my emotions. I felt betrayed, confused, but also worried about my parents. How bad were things really at home? I spent a restless night, waking up every few hours with a new thought or concern. When it finally dawned, I got up and cleaned my small apartment as best I could. It was ridiculous to worry about the impression my father would have of my housing considering the situation, but I couldn't help it. At 2 p.m., I received a message from my father. Just landed. I'm taking a taxi to your address. I'll arrive in approximately 45 minutes. The next 45 minutes were perhaps the longest of my life. I paced back and forth in the apartment, checking that everything was in order, although there wasn't much to organize. My possessions were reduced to the essentials: some clothes, medical books, an old laptop, and some basic kitchen utensils. Finally, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My father was there with a small travel suitcase. He looked older than I remembered, with new gray hair at his temples and lines of concern around his eyes. He looked at me for a moment, evaluating me with a doctor's eyes, and then hugged me tightly. "Ethan, you've given me a terrible scare." I hadn't expected that reaction. I had anticipated anger, confusion, maybe even accusations, but not this sincere and overwhelming concern. "I'm fine, Dad. It was just a fainting spell from tiredness." He let me go and entered the apartment, observing the space with professional attention. "This place is small," he commented, trying to be diplomatic. "It's what I can afford," I replied, feeling a pang of shame, although I knew it wasn't my fault. My father nodded slowly and then sat in my only chair. I sat on the bed. "I've spoken with your mother," he said directly, at length. His tone was grave and his gaze intense. "And?" I asked, although I already imagined the answer. "You were right. We never sent you a monthly allowance. Your mother told me that you preferred to be independent, that you had rejected our help." I felt the anger rising up in my throat again. "That's not true. I asked her for help several times." My father nodded as if he already expected that answer. "I know. I've reviewed our bank accounts, something I should have done a long time ago, and I've found irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts I don't recognize, loans I didn't know existed." Mom mentioned investments that went wrong. My father let out a bitter laugh. "They weren't investments, Ethan. They were bets. Your mother has had a gambling problem for years. I thought she had overcome it, but it seems she just got better at hiding it." I felt a knot in my stomach. Alex was right. My mother suffered from a gambling addiction. "How bad is the situation?" I asked, fearing the answer. My father ran a hand over his face, a gesture I recognized from my childhood. He did it when he was truly worried or stressed. "Pretty bad. The house is mortgaged again, despite the fact that we had already paid it off. There are several personal loans in her name, and the credit cards are maxed out. And your university tuition, I've been paying for it directly. That at least is secured." I felt small relief. At least my education wasn't in danger. "What are we going to do?" I asked, suddenly feeling like a small child looking for his parents to fix a problem. My father looked at me with determination. "First, we're going to solve your situation. No more multiple jobs, no more going hungry. I'll open an account for you and transfer a real monthly allowance, enough for you to live decently and focus on your studies. But what about the debts? I'll take care of that, and your mother is going to receive professional help. This time it's non-negotiable." I nodded, grateful for his firmness and clarity. "And now," he continued, "we're going to look for a better place for you to live. This apartment isn't suitable for anyone, much less for a medical student." "It's not that bad," I protested weakly, although I knew he was right. "Ethan, you have mold on the walls, and I can hear rats in the corners. It's not healthy." I couldn't argue with that. The apartment was cheap for a reason, and the rental contract. We'll figure it out. If necessary, I'll pay the penalty for early cancellation. My father's determination gave me a sense of security that I hadn't felt in months, but there was still a pending issue. Are you angry with Mom? My father sighed deeply. I'm disappointed, worried, and yes, also angry. But mostly I feel guilty for not having been more present, for not having realized what was happening, both at home and with you. His words resonated with me. Despite everything, I couldn't blame him entirely. I had also contributed to the problem by not insisting more, by not being completely honest about my situation. We both trusted too much, I said. My father nodded with a sad smile. It seems that way, but now we're talking, and that's what's important. Over the next few hours, my father and I worked out a plan. We would look for a new apartment, preferably shared with other students to reduce costs. We would establish a reasonable monthly allowance that would allow me to focus on my studies without having to work so many hours. And we would have real and frequent communication, not just superficial calls where we all pretended everything was fine. We also talked about my mother. My father had scheduled an intervention with an addiction specialist for when he returned to Dallas. It wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. That night, we went out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment. It was the first time in months that I had eaten at an establishment that wasn't fast food. You know, my father said as we ate, when I was in medical school, I also went through difficult times. Really? I always thought you had an ideal university experience. No one has an ideal experience, Ethan. We all struggle in our own way. I worked as an assistant in the morgue to pay for my expenses. It wasn't as glamorous as being a bartender. For the first time in a long time, I laughed genuinely. There's nothing glamorous about being a bartender in a fifth-rate bar in Queens. Believe me. My father smiled. The point is, I understand the struggle. What I don't understand is why you didn't ask me for help directly. I guess I wanted to prove to you that I could do it on my own, I admitted. Be as good a doctor as you, as independent. Ethan, being a doctor isn't about enduring unnecessary suffering. It's about learning to ask for help when you need it so you can help others later. His words hit me hard. I had been so focused on proving my worth that I had forgotten the most basic lesson of medicine. No one can heal alone. The next day, my father and I visited several shared apartments near the university. We found one that seemed promising, a 3-bedroom place in Washington Heights, shared with 2 other medical students. The rent was reasonable, divided among 3, and the place was clean and well-maintained. After signing the new contract and paying the deposit, he insisted on doing it. My father accompanied me to my old apartment to collect my things. It didn't take long. All my possessions fit into 2 large suitcases. Before leaving for the airport, my father gave me a long, strong hug. I'm proud of you, Ethan. Despite everything, you've shown a determination and resilience that many don't have. Thank you, Dad, and thanks for coming. I'll always come when you need me. Just remember to ask me directly next time. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Give my regards to Mom, I said, and tell her I support her, that I understand she's sick and needs help. My father nodded with moist eyes. I'll tell her. I love you, son. I love you too, Dad. After he left, I settled into my new room. It was small but clean, with a window overlooking a small park. My new roommates, Javier and Mina, welcomed me warmly. Both were in their 2nd year of medicine and perfectly understood the academic pressure. That night, as I unpacked my few belongings, I received a message from Alex. How did it go with your dad? Are you okay? I replied with a summary of what happened and a photo of my new room. Great. Do you want me to come by tomorrow to bring you a housewarming gift? I smiled as I wrote my response. Sure. But this time I'll cook. For the first time since I arrived in New York, I felt that things might work out. It wouldn't be easy. My mother had a long road to recovery ahead, and I had to make up for lost time in my studies, but I was no longer alone in this struggle. The following week, I quit my jobs at the cafe and as a laboratory assistant, keeping only the tutoring job, which was better paid and less physically demanding. With the monthly allowance my father had started sending me, I could cover my basic expenses without a problem. I also met with an academic counselor to develop a recovery plan. I would have to take some additional classes and study more intensely, but it was possible to catch up without repeating the year. A month after my father's visit, I received a call from my mother. Her voice sounded different, clearer, and more focused. Ethan, I'm in a recovery program, she told me without preambles. I go to daily meetings and have a specialized therapist. I'm very glad, Mom. How do you feel? Like I've woken up from a very long nightmare. I'm ashamed and sorry for what I put you through. You don't have to apologize to me, Mom. I understand that you were sick. Still, I owe you an apology. I put you in danger with my lies and my addiction. You didn't deserve that. We talked for an hour with an honesty we hadn't had in years. She told me how her gambling problem had started. First as an innocent pastime that gradually turned into an uncontrollable obsession. How shame and fear led her to lie more and more, creating a web of deception that finally trapped her. Your father has been incredibly understanding, she told me. He's reorganizing our finances, paying debts, and still finds time to accompany me to therapy twice a week. Dad is a good man, the best. And you're just like him, Ethan. You have his strength and his compassion. Those words meant a lot to me. I had always admired my father, and knowing that my mother saw some of his qualities in me filled me with pride. As the weeks passed, my life began to transform. I no longer arrived exhausted to classes. I could concentrate on the lessons and participate in discussions. I started to be part of a study group with Alex and other classmates, which not only helped me academically, but also strengthened my relationships. My new shared apartment turned out to be much better than I expected. Javier was an excellent cook, and we took turns preparing meals. Mina organized movie nights on Fridays, and it soon became a sacred tradition. We watched everything from cinema classics to the latest superhero movies, commenting and laughing together. One day, while we were studying in the library, Alex asked me, "Have you thought about what you're going to do during winter break?" "I guess I'll go to Dallas to see my parents." "Why don't you invite them to come? They could stay in a hotel nearby and see the city. Maybe it would be good for your mom to have a change of scenery." The idea seemed brilliant to me. I called my father that same night and proposed the plan. After consulting with my mother's therapist, who thought it would be beneficial for her recovery, they agreed to come to New York for the holidays. The reunion was emotional but comforting. My mother looked better, healthier, and more serene. My father seemed to have recovered some of his lost joviality. I took them to see my new apartment, to meet my roommates and Alex, who had become a fundamental pillar of my life in New York. One night, while we were dining at a small restaurant in the village, my father brought up a topic that had been on my mind. "Ethan, I've been thinking, have you considered the possibility of specializing in psychiatry?" The question surprised me. I had always assumed I would follow in his footsteps in surgery. "Not really." "Why?" "Because you've demonstrated an enormous capacity to understand and handle complex emotional situations. What you've experienced this year, the way you've handled the situation with your mother, that shows an empathy and strength that would be invaluable in psychiatry." I had never seen it that way. I had always thought of my struggle as an obstacle, not as a formative experience that could guide my career. "I'll think about it," I replied honestly. My mother, who had been listening in silence, added, "Whatever specialty you choose, you'll be a great doctor, Ethan, because you've already learned the most important lesson, how to fall and get back up." Her words resonated deeply with me. Despite everything that had happened, or perhaps because of it, I felt I was on the right path. I had discovered a resilience in me that I didn't know I had. I had formed genuine friendships and had learned to ask for help when I needed it. Life in New York was still challenging. Medical school hadn't become easier, and there were still moments when I felt overwhelmed by the academic load. But I was no longer alone in this struggle. I had my parents, who were now truly present in my life. I had Alex and my new friends, and above all, I had a new perspective on what it really meant to be strong and independent. When winter break ended and my parents returned to Dallas, I felt a mixture of sadness and optimism. I knew that the road to my mother's complete recovery would be long, and that our family relationship would continue to need work and honesty, but I also knew that we had taken the first steps in the right direction. The new semester began with renewed challenges. Classes were harder, exams more complex, but this time I was prepared. My schedule included time to study, to rest, and to socialize. I was no longer the exhausted ghost barely surviving day to day. One afternoon, while studying in the library, Alex passed me a note. "Remember when we met? I thought you were an antisocial snob. Good thing I was wrong." I smiled reading his words. I had been wrong about many things too. I had mistaken suffering for strength, isolation for independence, silence for dignity. "Thanks for not giving up on me," I replied. Alex winked at me and returned to his books. At that moment, I remembered the dinner with my father when it all started, his innocent question about my allowance, my honest answer that triggered everything else. Sometimes the truth could be painful, but it was always the first step toward healing. Now, as I prepared for another day of classes at medical school, I knew that my path wouldn't be like my father's, nor like anyone else's. It would be my own path, with its own challenges and rewards, and that was okay. In the end, that's what it truly meant to grow up, finding your own way, learning from your falls, and having the courage to ask for help when you need it. And maybe, just maybe, those lessons would someday make me the kind of doctor who could really make a difference in others' lives. Every morning, waking up in my new room with sunlight filtering through the window, I reminded myself that I had survived one of the most difficult periods of my life. And if I had been able to overcome that, I could face anything that came next.